Melvin, an astronaut, and a couple other science people from NASA, which was a lot of fun. And so I got to hang out with Leland a lot, and it was kind of funny because I had been to space camp with National Geographic, and so I had a space camp, blue jumpsuit, and I brought it and wore it just to make a joke out of it and stuff. And so he's like, well, then I'm going to wear mine. And so he wore his blue jumpsuit. Of course, his is real and has been in space. It's an astronaut's jumpsuit, but that was so much fun.
So they actually get to keep them. I think you and I had a conversation about that, what astronauts can keep and what they can't keep. I know that they kept their boots for walking on the moon, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, they wear the jumpsuits a lot. So Scott Kelly, I got to interview him not too long ago, and for his talk, he wore the jumpsuit. But after his talk, he took it off. So yeah, so often, I guess, when they want to represent NASA and stuff, they wear the jumpsuit, which is kind of cool.
That's amazing. So what you're filming now? You told me something about Blue Book. What was the deal with that?
So that's kind of the big news, really. So it's Blue Book. So I did get to the other real quick mention because it was fun, and I want to kind of plug it. But I got to also meet Neil deGrasse Tyson, which was a lot of fun. Oh. And this is kind of funny because I posted a picture of myself and Karen with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I did some video interviews that'll come out on Den of Geeks soon. But everybody's posting, he doesn't believe in UFOs, all this UFO stuff. And, of course, I'm way into science, and he's a very important scientist, and he had some very incredible things to say in my interview. So it was an absolute pleasure to meet him. But, guys, not everybody has to be into UFOs. And hopefully at some point, if we continue to have a relationship, I'll be able to broach the topic and maybe share some information with him. But, that wasn't what the interview was about, UFOs. So that was kind of funny. But what was about UFOs was Project Blue Book, and this is kind of making some news this weekend. It's kind of really making quite a few stories because History Channel is doing a show called Project Blue Book. And there was an activation there at Comic-Con, and I don't know why they call them activations. It was kind of funny. I even met one of the guys who is in charge of these different activations, and he didn't know why they called them activations. He was even laughing at himself because he was like, I don't know. But an activation is essentially an exhibit when a television show puts together a cool exhibit to promote their show. And Project Blue Book, this is really cool. This is a comic book that they gave us at the exhibit, and I want to show you this because this is the most important part about Project Blue Book is, look at this guy right here. Who's that? That's Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So this show is going to be centered around J. Allen Hynek and Project Blue Book. So you can see this is from a case 1972, which is, they're going over actual cases and depicting these cases. So the actor is, let me get his name, Aidan Gillen. Look right here real quick.
Does he look a little bit like Hynek?
Yeah, here, I've got actually a picture from the show, and yeah, look at him.
He does. Yeah, so anyone can Google that. The one people that are listening, you can... what's the show's exact name? So people
Project Blue Book.
Just Project Blue Book.
So they make him look like Hynek. He kind of has a gruff voice. During the Comic-Con weekend, they released a trailer, and you can go see that at the History Channel page. In fact, if you go to openminds.tv, I posted, they also released 3 stories of 3 of the cases they're covering. So they released a story about Men in Black, about the Flatwoods Monster, and about this Gorman UFO case from the 1940s, 1948. And I want to talk to you about that one in particular in a second. But these are stories that are going to be featured on the show. And you can see that in the trailer. I mean, essentially they did Vikings, which was huge. History Channel, it's a scripted drama. And it's great. If you haven't watched it, I love it. And it's a very well done scripted drama, high production. They're out in Norway and all of this big. It feels like a movie every episode. almost like Game of Thrones or something. So they're doing the same thing with UFOs and Project Blue Book on this television show. When you watch it, you can see this is like a movie. Every episode's like a movie. Very high production value. Aidan Gillen from Game of Thrones, so he's huge. Robert Zemeckis is the producer. This is a guy who directed Back to the Future, Contact, and other things. He's a big fan of Spielberg, and of course Hynek was inspired the movie Close Encounters for Spielberg. But the other thing that they're going to do, and I think that's why they kind of focus on this Men in Black thing, is that although the show's based on true events, like they repeat and they're really covering some of the big cases, they are adding a bit of speculation in there, in that their description of the show says, Hynek kind of starts to suspect that he's just a front man for a bigger secret project and they're not sharing everything with him. And of course, people in this field feel like that may be the truth. Not that we know that for sure, nor do we necessarily know that he felt that way, but that's going to be kind of some of the drama or some of the fiction added to this story. But it looks really, really good at this activation. So this is cool. When you first walk in, they kind of brief you. They have a staff person there who briefs you on what Blue Book was for people who were not aware. And then they ask you if you had your own UFO sighting. In my case,
Really?
I said yes.
Wow.
And it turned out practically everybody who walked in was saying yes, to my surprise. And, we couldn't hear. They just sat us each down with our own person. But I can overhear people saying, yeah, I've had my own. So you describe your sighting. And then what they say is at the end, you'll be able to pick up a drawing of your sighting. Huh. So that was neat. You then go through to another room where they cover Flatwood's Monster, Lubbock Lights, this Gorman incident, and you can kind of hear some audio from the show. They show you a trailer. Then you go into another room, and they've got this cool like radar and stuff like that in there, and you can send a message to space.
Wow!
And then on the other side, I did.
Were you friendly?
Of course, I was friendly.
Okay.
I'm always friendly. Yeah, but I warned them. I was so friendly to the aliens that I told them, stay away. These humans are crazy. Actually, I'll tweet what I had posted here after the show. But I told them that humans are dangerous, and they eat, living creatures, other Earth creatures. And isn't that gross, is what I said. So, because I figured aliens will agree with me. So I warned them to stay away. On the other side of this room were some guys that were kind of in their 1950s outfits, and they were like working, supposed to be like Blue Book staffers or something. But they were the sketch artists who were sketching out our sightings. On the wall, there was some other cool stuff from other real UFO sightings as well. And I did do a Facebook Live of my tour through there. So go to my Facebook and you can watch, see what this thing was like, because it was really cool. And sure enough, they did give me a picture of my sighting. And I did post that at openminds.tv, the picture along with my description of the sighting that they depicted there. So it was a really cool exhibit, or activation, as they call it in the Comic-Con world. But there's lots of stories coming out about this. And what's cool is because it's real. I mean, it feels like X-Files, but this is now kind of like, the godfather of UFOs, a true, specialist, J. Allen Hynek, out there kind of doing the investigation. So if you couldn't tell, I'm extremely excited.
Now, what channel did you say that's coming out on?
History Channel.
That's what I thought you said. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I sure hope you didn't give those aliens any ideas that this is a good place to eat, So I worry about that a little bit.
Well, if they were to come down here, and this is why I think it's important to be vegetarian. If they're to come down here and they're not vegetarian, how are they to choose what to eat? They'll see us. Do you eat this big round thing, or do you eat, what are the creatures that you would want to eat? So if they see us eating creatures, they're like, oh, this must be a thing. Let's pick up some of these guys and try them out. And
thus the cattle mutilation, And
I wonder if on other planets everything doesn't taste like chicken. What if it tastes like something else, just that's unique of Earth, that every living creature that you eat kind of tastes like chicken is, as we say.
Wow. Never thought of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Way too much to wrap my brain around.
Oh, this Gorman sighting, just real quick.
Yes.
You can read about this at the History Channel. But yeah, it's a really early dogfight from 1948. And it's cool that the History Channel is really pushing this case because it's a cool one, and they must have read that when they came across these files. But essentially, it's this guy. He was a World War II fighter. 1948, he's with the Air National Guard. He's flying in his P-51, and he spots this light, an orb of light. He thought it was the tail light from another plane, but it passed near him. And the radar controller said, "We didn't have anything on radar. There wasn't an aircraft that past you." So he turns around and he kind of pursues this thing. He says he gets he gets pretty close to it, and he described it as a 6 to 8 inch round light. That it was just kind of a solid light. No light seemed to be emanated past the diameter of this thing. So the characteristics of the light were strange. And then he began to chase it and fly around, and it kept banking around and doing all these things until it took off, just, was gone, as we read about so many other times. But he said he pursued this thing for 27 minutes, and there were other witnesses involved, other aircraft. So there were a lot of credible witnesses along with this case. So it's a fascinating sighting.
Just like kind of like a Foo Fighter, what they were saying.
Essentially, yeah. It's a Foo Fighter experience after World War II with this Air National Guard pilot and his P-51, which was a plane that was, used. That was one of our major. I think it was a Marine. The Marines used it in World War II, if I'm not mistaken. But someone could correct me. But anyways, it was a plane that we did use in World War II. But you can, at openminds.tv, I've got a link to it to the front page. I also tweeted it and Facebooked the story. You can also see it at the History Channel's Project Blue Book page, which people should explore because it's really, really neat stuff.
Great. Awesome. Anything, I know we're just about out of time here, but has any, really good sightings, are you aware of any good recent sightings people are talking about? I haven't really, I've been involved in a project. I haven't really taken a look myself.
There are some people, the sightings that I've seen that are out there have been figured out, essentially, and I've posted about a few of those. If you go to the Open Minds UFO News group on Facebook, you can see a lot of those stories. But, yeah, nothing too exciting in my opinion. It seems like everything has kind of been explained. So, unfortunately, no big sighting recently that I'm aware of.
Well, all right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Alejandro.
My pleasure. Say hi to Chris. He's great. This should be a great show.
All right. Excellent. All right. We'll see you next week.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right, everyone. So our guest, Chris Cogswell, he received his PhD in chemical engineering, focusing on the study of nanomaterials for the use as catalysts and absorbents. And he got that degree at Northeastern University, and he has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and philosophy from the University of New Hampshire. He actually graduated the same year as my son. How about that? And he has a podcast, and it's on basically like fringe science claims and science, and it's called the Mad Scientist Podcast. And I started listening to one. I'm going to check that podcast out for sure. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I think I got most of that right, didn't I? Sort of?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, you got it right. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So, Chris, I listened to you a while back when you were on Open Minds with Alejandro. I was pretty impressed. And but I don't remember listening to how you started getting a fascination for, I know it's not just UFOs, but UFOs are part of it. So along with your science interests and your philosophy interests, what really led you down the path of looking into the UFO topic, among other things?
So when I was a kid, I actually had what I would describe to be a near UFO sighting. Or maybe not a sighting even. I growing up had very, very vivid dreams. I still have very vivid dreams. Seems to be something that runs in my family. And so one night, as you know, any rambunctious 7-year-old kid, I stayed up way too late. I ate way too much candy. I snuck into my parents' bedroom to watch the X-Files reruns. And just like tore into, you know, those Christmas popcorn tins?
Yes.
Right, with like the different, just tore into one of those, right? Like I'm sure there wasn't any caramel corn left in the morning. And I remember then falling asleep and then being woken up later by a green glowing something.
Wow. That
I felt was looking at me from the closet, from the hallway of my parents', the hallway where my parents' bedroom was. And that memory just kind of stuck with me. You know, I had no idea what happened. I seemed to just wake up the next morning and everything was fine, whatever. And I had a couple of other similar kind of experiences where I would be kind of in and out of sleep and I'd have a scary nightmare experience kind of thing. And then I kind of just pushed it to the back of my head. You know, I was like, well, it's weird. It's a scary thing. I don't know what happened. And finally, I started getting older, you know, maybe around 13, 14, 15, around that age. I asked my mom, I said, you know, do you remember me saying anything about that? And my mom's explanation, as far as I can remember, it was basically, yeah, you used to get really bad fevers as a kid and your brain was boiling. You know, so basically, you know, I was in bed, I must have had a bad fever or something, and so and now as an adult, I kind of know some of the sources of some of the when I look today, I don't think that, you know, of other people. If I could be tricked, other people could be tricked. Other people can be mistaken. Other people can have scary experiences. And even if 100, you know, even if nearly 99% of them are just mistakes, what if there's that 1% that is a real experience or a real case of someone seeing something strange at night or being abducted or whatever? So really, it was a mix of my own personal experiences and kind of my love of science that made me want to ask these questions more, because again, you know, the history of science is filled with these things that we thought were completely impossible for generations, you know, and something is always impossible until it isn't anymore. Right. So in my mind, this is kind of one of those interesting questions where, you know, thousands of people every month report sightings, hundreds report things like direct contact. And I think regardless, again, of whether or not there's any ultimate, regardless of what the ultimate source of those cases are, there is something useful and interesting scientifically to investigate here. So that's kind of where I come from with all these questions.
And I would notice on your show that you do other topics. I saw you did Mothman and other things like that. But that's called the Mad Scientist Podcast. But you were just before the show when we were checking in, and we'll show that logo. Go ahead. So just before the show when we were checking in, you said that you also did another podcast. And did you say that had something to do with science? I mean, or
yes.
Space or something?
So we are starting a show basically with Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, where the second Wednesday of every month we are going to be talking about these cases from the lens of science and skepticism and kind of questioning really some of those ideas. So we're calling them reality paranormal. And so they're going to be going out on a Tuesday or Wednesday nights. Sorry, the second Wednesday of every month nights. So be sure to check those out. And I'll put the links up on my Twitter page and everything and give you those as well.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. So I figured we could probably get this part out of the way by talking about MUFON and your short stint. How long were you actually with MUFON?
I think I was at MUFON maybe 2.5 Scaramucci's. maybe. I don't know.
Let's see, that was 11 days.
Yeah, no, I was there longer than that.
His time was 11 days. So you're talking about almost a month, right? Yeah.
No, so we're talking maybe then, 8 to 10 mooches of my time at MUFON. So I was there for between 4 and 5 months. My full time there was, and that includes kind of me initially getting involved in the organization, wanting to become a member, wanting to help do some research, kind of trying to get a look into their reports and, the books, so to speak, and to my eventual resignation.
So, but before we talk about your resignation, you had a really good goal of getting things done there. How was that progressing in the right direction before the hit the fan?
So it was progressing. It was the thing with MUFON that I think a lot of people not actively involved in investigations don't realize is that MUFON is really more of it's not like a big, very organized organization. It's very focused on individual states. And so part of what I was hoping to accomplish was trying to consolidate some of that energy. There are people in states doing wonderful work, doing really good investigations, spending their own time, spending their own money, to go out there and do these investigative cases and things, and then that information doesn't go anywhere. It just ends up on a server in the basement of MUFON headquarters.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about that.
Yeah, and it's a valid complaint. I mean, you would think that with all of the cases that they get and with all the time and everything that you'd be able to make something really useful. And what I found was that it was not a lack of information that stopped that from happening. It was more of a lack of clear direction and a lack of energy and motivation. We managed to, probably the biggest thing that we accomplished while there was the creation of I hope it's still going and I hope it's still available to people. And if anyone emails and it's not available anymore, then that's a shame. But what we were able to do was that MUFON database, one of the biggest things keeping MUFON from giving that database information out to other researchers were concerns about personally identifying information. So, if you make a UFO report, you don't want then your name and address and cell phone number and everything else, your contact info, to go out to the, anybody who says, I want to investigate, I want to research. You don't want anyone to get your information. So one of the biggest concerns was ensuring that information went out to the right people. And so, and was kept safe in cases where we didn't want it to go out. So
we're going to have to hold it. We're going to have to keep that thought, if you would, or write that thought down. We'll get back to it. So we're coming up on a break right now. This is Martin Willis of Podcast UFO on KGRA Radio. And my guest is Christopher Cogswell. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Clear. 3 minutes, gentlemen.
3 minutes. Got it. Okay. All right. Nice. So just quickly for the people on YouTube, I did start the show on time. I'm sorry, on YouTube. So I just want to tell you that we are not going to be live at MUFON this weekend. We are going to gather. We're going to gather interviews, and those interviews will be put into a YouTube show that'll come up sometime the beginning of the week. I'm not sure if it's Monday or not, so just want to let everyone know that. So, Chris, we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that topic when we come back from the break. But I'll ask you during the break here, how does your science background? I guess I could actually this during the podcast too, but. What part, I should say it this way, what part of your science background helps you the most when you're looking at the UFO topic?
I would say, honestly, it's communication skills. It's the ability to take a complicated idea and write about it in such a way that it's both academically rigorous enough that people who people who are trying to convince, frankly, won't just dismiss it. And that's kind of like an ivory tower sort of, frankly, a kind of a jerkish way of looking at things, right? But unfortunately, that's kind of the way things happen. So you have a lot of groups that will just throw away UFO reports out of hand because they're like, well, this was written by just some guy, some lady, whatever. So trying to up the level and the standardization of those things was a huge, really was a very big part of, I think, the goal was to make these reports, make these things look more efficient and official. And so really, I mean, and that's been true throughout my entire career so far in everything. No matter how much math I learn, I'll always think that philosophy degree was the most useful because it, taught me how to argue and also how to put my ideas out into the world.
Wow. So philosophy is very helpful.
I love my philosophy degree. It was the best. It was the best. One of the best decisions I've probably ever made.
Yeah.
I would say.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't take philosophy because there's not a lot you can do with it except if you want to teach. There's really not. Yeah, it's not too much you can do.
It's an interesting degree because if you look at, and this was something that it was kind of funny. They would, the department that I was in, especially.
Hang on just 1 second. Bill, are we going back on soon?
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt you guys.
Yeah,
but
go ahead and interrupt next time. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seriously, I won't be offended.
All right. Maybe we'll catch that part. We'll finish that up in the second part, second break.
Stand by, gentlemen, about 10 seconds.
All right.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back to Podcast UFO. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we are on KGRA Radio, and my guest is Chris Cogswell. Chris, before the break, you were talking about the ins and outs of MUFON, and I told you to write it down, did you?
I did. Okay. I did write it down.
Good. So what exactly, do you remember exactly where you were going with that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so
I'm glad someone did.
the biggest I would say accomplishment that we had and the biggest milestone we made was opening up allowing for the opening of the database to other researchers potentially. So as of right now, the database manager for MUFON, who is Tomas, who is wonderful, does not get, I think, as much credit as he deserves because he's really the one who does a lot of this kind of stuff. But the database itself now, if you as an independent researcher want to know, say, I want every case between, in this area between August 1st and August 15th of 1995, they can now get that data for you. They can now export it and send it to you in a way that is not identifiable to an individual person.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of people have complained about, one of the complaints I hear the most about MUFON is someone is working on a particular case, trying to solve it, and they want to talk to the witnesses and they can't. That's one. But I understand how that works, how important it is to keep the safety of anonymity if someone needs it or wants it or desires it. But let me ask you this: I don't even know if you know the answer to this, but if I were to report, say, a mass sighting, other people saw it too, to MUFON, am I able to say, hey, look, I don't mind using my name, use my name if people want to contact me? Can you actually do that in a MUFON report?
You can, but I believe that there is some... what I'm going to imagine there would have to be is some... So when you make a report to MUFON, there is paperwork you actually have to fill out. And in some ways, it's designed in a certain way to make it so that, some guy on the weekend who just wants to kind of hoax something or make a prank or whatever, he's not going to spend the 15, 20 minutes to fill out all the forms. You don't go to the DMV to get a joke driver's license, right? So I guess it's kind of the same theory. Mm-hmm. So on that form, though, one of the checkboxes you can check is I prefer to remain anonymous or not. Or, I'm happy with other people contacting me about this case. So that is something that's possible for sure. And also, if once your case goes into the database, they are made available. A limited amount of information is made available on the MUFON UFO Tracker website. But again, it's very limited. It's things like, any photos you took, maybe, and a brief description, and the general, this happened in California, stuff like that.
I see. So if someone is doing research, can they actually get much deeper into? I mean, how do you sign up for something like that? Like, to say if I was looking at a particular case and I wanted to get more information about it, would I contact someone in particular, or is it things just readily available if I know where to find them?
So the goal was that you would contact me, but now there's no one in my position in MUFON, so okay. I don't know who you would contact. You could try it. You can give it a shot and see if you can just send an email to Jan or someone. But honestly, that. And the other thing too is, so I still have my printouts of the database that MUFON was gracious enough to allow me to continue working with, to do some statistical work that my team is doing. But for newer cases, things like that, and whether or not they decide to continue that kind of vision that I was hoping to accomplish there, I have no idea.
Okay. All right, so let's get to the bad stuff and just get that over with. So you decided to leave MUFON. Do you want to go into what made you? I read your letter when you wrote it. Was that 2 months ago or more? 2 or 3 months?
A little bit more, 3 months around there.
Yeah.
Man, that was it was such a gut punch. I grew up reading about J. Allen Hynek and reading about people that, were these scientific minds who got involved. And I finally was like, I got involved. It's, we're going to do so much great stuff. And then something like this comes up and it just takes the wind out of your sails completely, but so the reason I resigned was that I believed, as I think many in the public believed, that a certain state leader was removed due to racist comments made on Facebook. It turned out that removal was a lot less of a removal and a lot more of a shuffling about, so you kind of it's kind of like when Putin made Medvedev president or prime minister of Russia for that one, like that month-long period.
The place card holder. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Kind of seems to be what's going on.
Yeah.
And then besides that too, I found out that the issue of racism was very questionable things was more rampant than I had previously believed. And so
before you move from that, do you mean among other members or just that particular member?
Among other members as well.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and just kind of a general look. MUFON is an older organization. There's no way around that. MUFON is mostly made up of people in their 60s plus, and a lot of and with that comes obvious demographics, right? It's like if you went to a high school event or whatever with a Reaganomics t-shirt on or something, you'd probably get yelled at, right? It's kind of there's kind of a feel to these kind of things, unfortunately. And although we would hope that, and it's not true at all of everywhere. My local chapter in Minnesota was amazing. All the chapters that I've spoken to generally have been amazing, but it is definitely something that is not taken as seriously as it should be, especially for an organization that is having trouble recruiting young, new members.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And it's actually a goal. I've heard, Jan talk about that, trying to get them in.
It was a goal that we shared in common, mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I believe that there is something there that makes, I believe that there is something, whether it be a financial reason or just a personal reason or whatever, that, causes them as an organization to be unable or unwilling to distance themselves from these people that make comments like this and hold these kind of views and things. And so even just from a public relations or just from a purely selfish standpoint of I want this organization to continue, it would be prudent to separate yourself entirely, right, from that kind of viewpoint. And honestly, I think it comes down to a problem of having a backbone in your beliefs. MUFON for so long has been the place where you can come and say anything and no one will question you. No matter how preposterous the claim. And that's not to say that we don't take people's experiences seriously. We do. But, the 15th time a guy comes and shows you a blank photo of his backyard and says, look at the Bigfoot I caught. I'm going to stop taking your photos. There's no way. So it's kind of the same thing here. There's no criticality at MUFON meetings. There's no criticality at MUFON generally, in my opinion. And that was, again, something that I believed the board and I had in common as a goal. But when you can't even tell someone that they probably, they're probably not a alien human hybrid with telekinetic powers. If you can't tell someone that, you're probably not going to tell someone that they're, their Facebook posts are offensive. Right. So that's the unfortunate
So
thing.
Do you happen to know, had your, when you resigned, did that cause any type of ripple effect of any kind that you're aware of? Anything
As far as I can tell, it has done nothing but open up my free time for more video games, which is unfortunate because, like I said, I really still do believe that the vast majority of the membership in MUFON are good people, are people who have the best intentions at heart, or are people that have had a legitimately frightening experience that they want answers to. And those people are not being served well by, these both being exposed to, vile beliefs, but also not being well served by being fed anything any person wants to come and try to give to them. There has to be a level of critique. There has to be a level of peer review and control over what we deem as a community, as a UFO community. What do we deem as being a sensible argument or a good avenue to research down or whatever? There has to be some control over that. Otherwise, you just look forever for nothing. You never find any evidence. You never move forward. And that's in my opinion, the big takeaway from the UFO field over the last 60, 70 years is when we are not stringent in our critique, when we are not careful about what we take to be evidence, then eventually everything is permissible, everything is an okay idea, everything is a sensible theory and argument. And that's when you get things like starseed arguments or the more intense of the ancient aliens theories and things like that. So you start with a good idea or an interesting idea, and you just water it down so much that you get nothing in the end.
Right. I actually read that post that this whole thing started from, and I really feel that there's no place for someone that's going to post something like that in any type of way that has any type of position in MUFON. I feel that very strongly myself. Yeah. I just don't. It has no place. And
no, and the thing is too that there is no, again, there is nothing, it has nothing to do, even for me ultimately, whether or not, a lot of people have messaged me and been very great and supportive about this whole thing. And a lot of people have messaged me and been not so great because it's the internet and
yep, you get that.
That's the way the internet goes. Yeah. So I've had, one of the big comments that I've gotten is, well, when is a person's apology enough, right? When is a person saying they're sorry about something like this enough? And again, it's the cover up is always worse than the crime. MUFON said that he was out. MUFON said that this was taken care of. They promised me that it was taken care of. Otherwise, I would have joined on board. And to then find out right as we started building up a good head of steam to start getting over some of these hurdles, to then find out that, well, actually, when we said they weren't involved, we just meant they didn't have a title anymore. They're actually still heavily involved in all the planning for every big event. When that happens, they lied to me. They lied to the public, in my opinion. And again, it comes down to this question of, if you are an organization whose one of their major arguments is that the government is hiding something about UFO information or truth, then you need to be as crystal clear, as transparent as you possibly can be, because otherwise you start looking, it starts looking very, very shady.
Yeah.
So it's just not a good position to be in.
Yeah. Well, I actually commend you for taking that stand, because I think your heart was in the right place. And do you have any regrets, or you feel like that was the right decision and now you get to play video games?
I think it was the right decision. I do have regrets in that I regret that I wish that more of the individuals that I had spoken to about this, I guess, sort of had felt that they could also make the same kind of moral stand that I did. I honestly am very hopeful that someday MUFON can continue and will become maybe again an organization that I can be proud to be a member of. But I'm also, though, very excited about the potential new things that come about from something like this. When I first joined MUFON, the reason why I first joined MUFON was that I found other larger kind of societies, like, say, the American Skeptical Society and things like that, to be too debunky, I guess would be the word. I'm not really interested in ridiculing people for having a scary experience or for believing something differently than I am. I'm interested in understanding why they believe it and then trying to find a way to make sense of what they experienced. So, and there are a lot of people that would consider themselves to be scientifically oriented and skeptical, even, that I think have that same viewpoint. And I've heard us described as different things, but probably my favorite is the spooky skeptics. Right? That's the kind of group that I wanted to join, was a group that was made up of other like-minded people who really wanted to get to the bottom of this stuff. And if we couldn't, the good thing about science is, or the good thing about an experiment is, even if at the end of the experiment you find that your hypothesis was wrong, that teaches you something.
Right.
The problem with a lot of the way, in my opinion, that these esoteric investigations are done is they're not developed as experiments or not developed as studies. They're just open-ended questions. The question of, do UFOs exist or do UFOs visit the Earth, that'll never have, that will have a definitive answer eventually, but at the point where it's just dumb chance, it's luck whether or not it happens. Right? If a UFO crashes in the middle of Fifth Avenue, New York, barring some really great digital CGI effects and editing and things, that is going to be the definitive proof that proves that question. But you can start to ask more directed questions that you can get answers to and still learn something. And that's kind of where where myself and some of the people I'm working with are trying to focus our efforts. So, from kind of the ashes of what I was trying to accomplish at MUFON, when I put out a call for scientists to get involved with MUFON with me, I was pretty blown away by the response of people who wanted to get involved. And those people all kind of followed me out. So there is still a group of people working. There are still good people in this field doing research and doing investigations. And so I still have a lot of hope and energy to do the work in this field or try to get something done here. It just won't be done with a nice fancy logo on my hat.
Well, there are other groups I know that would love to have you. I know Paul Carr is part of one. I can't think of the name of that one, where they do just like scientific study. Then there's the UFO data. There's that group there.
Sure.
And there's also the group that Alejandro is actually part of or has something to do with. It's another scientific group. So there's a lot of groups, but I know, MUFON is as established, long established, and, I can't remember exactly how old it is, but isn't it like the oldest surviving, I think, or there may be one other surviving?
It is now the oldest. It is the oldest surviving. The group actually that Alejandro is part of, and I'm also a part of, actually.
Oh, you are?
Is the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy.
That's it.
Or SCU.
Yep.
Which I think is going to grow into be something very exciting, I hope.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, MUFON is the oldest one, but before MUFON, it was NICAP.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So your Skype has frozen, so might have to hang up here. We'll see what's going on here. And we have a break coming up in about 6 minutes. Oh, looks like you're back. Are you back?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your Skype froze there. So it's happened a couple times.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. All right. So I don't know if you were talking, or are you there?
No, I was just saying. Yeah, I am there.
Yeah. I don't know if you have an internet issue. It didn't happen when we did the test earlier, but anyway. So that is good that you did that, and you're looking at possibly something will come out of the ashes, as you say. Are you still in touch with a number of people that you were in touch with there, and just avoiding some, or how's that going?
I'm not really avoiding anyone. I would say that's kind of not really my style, anyways. Kind of a loud person, so it's hard to avoid. it's not in my nature to hide.
Yeah.
I would say that if anything, it has made me, when I had an official position in MUFON, I felt it to be much more necessary to be more political, I guess, in my statements, because again, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing a group, you're representing a people of wildly different beliefs and ideas and things. And so, I couldn't say things that maybe are direct, but are really my opinion or my belief. I had to be more careful with them. So it's kind of been freeing in a way to be able to just say what I really think and really go after some of these ideas more critically or more strongly. And I've been in contact with some of the folks that I worked with, but really for the most part, again, it's kind of one of those situations where, kind of gave an ultimatum and the choice was made. And so, what are you going to do? Can't really go back on that. So,
yeah. Yep. All right. Well, we only got a couple of minutes. We got four or 5 minutes left before we go into the next break. So I thought we would talk and discuss how, is it metaphysics? Not metaphysics. What did I hear you say that some of your study is that has to do with metals and the changing of a metal for another use? What's that called again?
So what a lot of UFO sites are calling it today are metamaterials.
I knew it had a meta in it.
Yeah, metamaterials, which is kind of an interesting beyond materials, but really what they're called functionalized nano-engineered surfaces or materials, right? It's kind of the forefront of nanotechnology today. It's really where scientific research into various materials topics are focusing today.
There's that like honeycomb molecular structure that's supposed to be something that just came out that's really, really thin. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Graphite.
The
other one is graphene. So it is graphite, but it becomes graphene when it's a single layer at the nanoscale.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
There's other ones though. I mean, the honeycomb is a interesting shape geometrically because it's it has the lowest energy to, or lowest molecular bond kind of strain energy over its surface, over its entire surface area. So it's a very stable structure. And so a lot of things in nature tend to make the honeycomb shape. Things like alumina when it's anodized, things like, say, pineapple outsides and organic molecules, anything maybe with a benzene or a cyclohexane are all composed of various groups of these hexagon bond shapes. But the work that I did kind of bridges the nano world and the bulk world, in that you create materials that have engineered properties at the nanoscale that you can then alter in just a lab, or just with something simple like, say, a laser, or a change in temperature, a change in pressure. So the idea being that you can build specific properties or materials that can change to the application of interest and allow them then to do things such as, just think about a simple piston cylinder kind of assembly for a motor, right? All you need for that to work, in theory at least, in essence, is a single moving part, right? You need a moving part, and you need something to transport the energy between the piston and the cylinder area, right? So in a piston cylinder, it's a gas that does that transfer of work. Mm-hmm. At the nanoscale, they're building things like basically nano springs that are these materials that when light waves hit them, they expand, and then when it gets dark, they shrink again. Wow. So another way to transfer energy as work, but you're doing it in a way where you can build something like, say, a very, very small engine, potentially. That's the kind of research work that I was involved in, although mine was more focused on the use of these techniques to build larger materials for things like capture or drug delivery or things like that.
Interesting. Now, so if you were to speculate that there's alien technology that's beyond what our knowledge is, in other words, if we were to find a crashed UFO from another civilization that was a million years ahead of us as far as advancement and knowledge, we would actually expect to find some of what you're talking about in the materials, most likely, right?
It's hard to say for certain, right? Because again, that's sort of the trap that a lot of sci-fi writers and things get into, where if you're writing a proto sci-fi novel in the 1800s, you're like, and the spacemen, everything will run on bicycles, right? And so then from today, it looks like everything will be small and sleek. I would expect that we would find. There's a couple things I would expect that we would find. I would expect that we would find nanomaterials. The other one that I would expect that we would find, actually, though, are non-Earth stable thermodynamic states. So crystalline structures or material structures that are literally not possible to be made on the surface of the Earth due to the difference in pressure and temperature. And the other one would be potentially things in what's known as the island of stability, which is a theoretically proposed area of super heavy elements. If that island of stability exists, it would open up chemistries that we have no knowledge of or no idea of today.
Wow. Okay, we'll get back to that. We're coming on the break right now. This is Martin Willis of Podcast UFO on KGRA Radio, and my guest is Chris Cogswell. We'll be right back.
Clear.
How much time we got this time?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Got it. Okay.
And Martin, you're going to be commercial free for the next hour, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we were going to jump back and talk a little bit about a topic that we were in the middle of in the last break. Did you write that down?
Yeah. So we were talking about philosophy.
Yeah.
And why I liked it.
Yeah.
And why I did it, in fact.
Yeah.
So they always brought this chart out to show us at our philosophy classes where they said, well, look, if you look at what degree earns you the most in 20 years in your career, it's philosophy every time. And from the standpoint of a fourth year philosophy student who's looking either at grad school or a job at a bookstore, you're kind of like, well, that looks great. And, what happens to the rest of us? Do we die before our 30s? How does that average happen? So, I really did. I found it to be extremely worthwhile, extremely useful, and by far the most useful skill I learned in undergraduate study that I used in grad school, and again still use today, is just that ability to write and see an argument and pick it apart and not be intimidated by very difficult texts. Texts and not difficult. Even if the idea itself is not necessarily complicated and difficult, scientists have a way of writing things very badly. So it just gets impossible, especially if you're, I had some papers that I had to use in my research that were originally written in Russian, translated to German, and then translated to English from German.
Oh, you lose so much in each translation.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And in that, thankfully it was only like a handful of papers from the very beginnings of research into zeolites and clays and things that I worked with. But oh my goodness, that paper, reading that thing was impossible. I would never have gotten through it if I hadn't already had to read, 12 different versions of, I don't know, Kant, right? Where one of them is this one guy's opinion and this other guy uses a different word for whatever, and oh god.
Wow.
Yeah. No, but I really did enjoy it quite a bit, and really, I always sing the praises of UNH every time I talk to anybody, because it's just such a quality. You get such a high quality of undergraduate education. And the only reason I think that it's not ranked more highly is because the grad school, they're not really focused on graduate studies. They're focused on undergraduates.
All right,
Chris, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're going to be coming back in about 10 seconds.
That's
no
good.
worries.
I apologize.
Yeah. Oh, no. Told you to do it.
All right, hold on. We're in 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back to Podcast UFO on KGRA Radio. This is Martin Willis with Podcast UFO. My guest is Chris Cogswell. Now, at the turn of I wrote it down this time. Can you believe it? You were talking about island stability, I believe, and material structure.
Yeah.
What else would be like a really unique? Well, let me just say this. A number of people have said this to me before. Well, there's only so many elements that we believe exist. We don't know for sure, but most likely exist in the universe. So if something comes in as some type of alloy, then it could be basically made on Earth. But what would be like a telltale sign that you're talking about the nano stuff? Is that what that would be, like a telltale sign that it must have come from somewhere else?
So the nano thing is a little bit. The nano properties are a little bit more subtle than that, because you can have nano properties from normal everyday materials. So clays are a very good example of that. Clays are really the first nanomaterial we did any kind of research on, really, as a society, or just as a people, I guess, as a human race. And clays are nanostructured such that they have, some clays anyways, have single layers of 1 to 2 nanometer wide solid silica, right? So aluminosilicate. And then in between those layers is a layer of water or a layer of something else, some other kind of solution. And it's what allows, you know how when you have a clay, you can kind of spread it, right?
Yep.
You can mold it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it's hydrated. There's water in between those layers of material.
Yep.
And so then when you heat it, all that water goes away, and those silanol groups actually chemically fuse. They bond and make silicone dioxide or aluminum dioxide bonds with each other.
So pottery, porcelain, all that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ceramic.
All of that is technically a nanomaterial, although it's not a very useful one because it has very little open room once it's heated. So, but that would be something that we might get in a lab and look at and say, oh, it has nano features, but it would be a naturally made nano featured material. What I would think, though, again, those So today, if we have a piece of material that we think might have come from a meteorite, let's say, we do look for isotope ratios, although that's, I think, been given a little bit too much buzz in the UFO community. That's not, not a super great tool. But we do look for things like crystal structures that we don't know about on Earth yet. So, for instance, there are crystal structures that only form under extremely high temperatures and pressures. And we find them in, say, geological deposits. We find them from meteorites. We can make them in the lab. If we were to find a material that we think is from a spacecraft and we ran it, say, through an X-ray diffraction machine, and if we were able to tell that it was a pure material at that point and it was crystalline in the first place, and we found that it contained a crystal structure that we did not currently have documentation for, that would be very interesting. The other thing that I would look for, too, you mentioned earlier that all of the elements that we think exist today are known. Although that is true, that's where that island of stability idea comes in. Atomic nuclei are stable, most generally are stable, when their ratio of protons to neutrons is 1. So if you have 1 proton, you usually have 1 neutron. Mm-hmm. When things start to stray away from that 1-to-1 ratio, you get radioactive decay spontaneously. And so that's why things like, say, uranium-238, uranium has, I think, a proton number of like 92 or something. Don't know it off the top of my head. It's somewhere around there. But it has an atomic mass of 238, so that's quite a bit more neutrons than protons, which is what makes it so unstable, amongst other varied things. But so one of the ideas in nuclear chemistry right now, that it's still kind of a pie-in-the-sky idea, but it's a very interesting one in my opinion, is that what if we find other ratios of protons to neutrons that are stable? So let's say, for example, all of the elements that we're making past uranium, all the trans-uranium elements they're both unstable, so they radioactively decay spontaneously, but they also decay very quickly. So they have half-lives on the order of I think the most long-lived one has a half-life of like a minute or something. So they're disappearing as soon as we make them in the lab. Not even the lab. As soon as we make them in the collider, they're gone. You only have a couple of milliseconds to study these things.
Wow.
But again, if there is a planet out there that has life, that has a different chemistry in such a way that they do have access to these elements with neutron to proton ratios of, say, 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever the number is that makes it stable, then potentially they might have access to super heavy elements that exist stably on their planet that we don't have access to. And that wouldn't be something that would not necessarily be something, say, where, oh, well, we're all part of the same universe, so shouldn't they exist here? They would exist here if we were, say, closer to, I don't know, where elements started, where matter started, or if we were near a black hole, or there's all kinds of different things that could make interesting new chemistries for us that we don't have access to here. So I would say, though, again, as always, the biggest thing that's going to show us that something is not from here, so it comes from space, but then also that it is interesting in such a way that we think it might be made by intelligent life, is going to be it has bodies that appear to be engineered into it specifically. So not just an interesting nanostructure or crystal structure or whatever, that it literally, if you apply a voltage to it, it lights up. Or if you heat it, it seems to release a drug or things like that. That's the area. Those are the kinds of things that I would be looking for. And again, it's part of, I think, the reason why these arguments about things, say, like alloys and things, they always make me kind of roll my eyes, because the answer is not going to be that simple.
I see. Okay, so we are accepting phone calls at this time if anyone wants to call in and ask our guest a question. So did you ever look into the Bob Lazar claim of element 115? Do you remember? Did you ever hear about any of that, or look into any of that, or did that puzzle you in any way?
I've heard about it. I've heard about it a little bit, but really have not looked into it as enough or as much as I should probably. But it's basically this.
Yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Basically, he just said that he observed it, and there was a large amount of it, which is it just made me think of it when you're talking about something being very unstable and gone in a nanosecond. So I think that element has been found or something, but it's very unstable and gone. Am I getting any of that right? Do you know anything about that?
So, element 115, currently we call it Moscovium.
Okay.
It which is fun.
Yeah.
It has let's see here. It has a half-life on the order. Its most stable half-life is 650 milliseconds. So, its most stable is still gone in less than a second.
Yeah.
It's interesting, potentially. This would be one where, again, you're starting to edge close to that idea of, say, an island of stability, right? So it is atomic number 115, and it has 290. So it has about 115 protons and 175 neutrons. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know enough to say anything fully about it yet. But
I think his claim had to do with energy. And when something's unstable like that, I mean, it would be like a source of energy, wouldn't it? And I'm not saying on one side of the argument or the other, because I really have my doubts about a lot of things when it comes to Bob Lazar. But is something like that, with that molecular structure, something that could be used for some type of energy?
Yeah, so all radioactive materials can be used to get energy from them, in that you can use them you can use them, say, in a nuclear energy cycle, right? But that is a very different claim than his claim of, say, the gravity warp drive kind of idea. So nuclear energy is basically like a very... Imagine that all of our energy ran on hamster wheels or something, right? So you have the hamster running in the wheel, and it's a very rudimentary energy source. Nuclear energy is kind of like, well, we get rid of the hamster and we put a robotic hamster in its place. It's like it's a really complicated solution that we just stick into a really dumb original system, right? So nuclear energy. So the major difference between, say, a coal energy system and a nuclear one is, in the coal system, it is the burning of coal that produces the heat that makes the steam become high pressure that then moves the turbine. In a nuclear reactor, it is the nuclear decay that's heating up the steam that then pushes the turbine. Mm-hmm. So basically, though, the same system, just a different energy source. What a lot of the arguments about, say, space travel technology and things like that is that there is some unknown energy type that we can then use to make a new type of engine entirely. So, that's where you get into these arguments about 0-point energy and vacuum states and all that stuff. But again, we really have not progressed a lot farther. We're still basically we are still using steam engines. We got different types of batteries and more interesting energy sources, but ultimately it's been the same type of energy generation system since we first discovered it. So I don't know. I mean, it's possible that there's all kinds of different ways to do it, but the simplest one that we still use is that steam-driven energy system. So that's one way you can get energy out of these things. The other way would be these potentials for, say, okay, there's a weird isotope of this material that potentially has some kind of anti-gravity properties or something. That's never been proven. We don't really know what gives an object mass, though, still. So potentially, but that's all sci-fi kind of, that's way out there sci-fi stuff.
Wow. I've asked this to a couple of astronomers, and I'm going to ask you because of your background. Do you think? What do you think about the Big Bang? And I'm not a conspiracy. I'm not trying to do conspiracy here, but I'm always puzzled by the absolutely nothing or the thing, 25 million times smaller than an atom bursts into in a millionth of a second, all of a sudden has all the energy that there ever will be all throughout the universe, out of nothing. That's always, so someone with your background, I'm going to ask you, I know it's a puzzle.
I'm glad I came on here for softball questions, man.
But it's just, what's that?
I said I'm so happy we decided on softball questions here, man. This is good. What do you think about the universe?
One real softly.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I did try to get a caller in, no one called.
I know, it's okay. It's fine.
Okay.
The problem, I think, with a lot of those kinds of, so first off, I'm not an astronomer. So
don't cop out on me.
I'm not copping out. I'm just saying. Okay. I'm just saying, as any good scientist would have to, that is not my area of expertise. However, I would say the problem with all kinds of arguments like that, where it gets back to that, say, I mean, it's similar to, I had someone ask me this question about, they were talking about they found a dinosaur bone someplace, some geologist or archaeologist found some dinosaur bone someplace, and then from the bone itself, they made an argument that the animal must have been eating a certain type of plant, and the way it did it was this way, and just kind of inferring all these extra things on top of what the bone, like what the actual evidence itself could tell you. The Big Bang Theory has stuck around so long, theoretically at least, because the astrophysics community has not been able to tear it down yet. So in the viewpoint of, say, I'm sticking to my fellow scientists, I would hope, and I'm sure that it's true, that their peer review process is keeping it. If it's a good theory, it just won't be able to withstand. It'll be able to withstand peer review for as long as it needs to.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting if someday, they actually find, one part of it was 100%, really did happen, but we have new evidence that, whatever it is, that, something else happened.
Well, that's the problem with theories like that, though, is what counts as evidence, right? It's kind of like those arguments. To me, any arguments about what came before the Big Bang, it's kind of philosophically, it's an impossible argument you're making for yourself, because you're basically stating, before there was matter and energy for me to measure, I think there was this.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was an elephant.
Yeah.
You can't prove me wrong, right? None of the tests you do will ever prove me wrong, because there's nothing to measure before the Big Bang.
Yeah.
So so for me, it is pragmatically, it becomes a question of, well, we can't measure it, so I don't know, and we have to leave it aside, right? So at the same time, though, from a philosophical point of view, it all comes down to, say, the entropic principle, where, right, I mean, we might not know, even if something is unlikely, if it has happened and we seem to measure it, it can still be unlikely, but it must have happened that way. At least once, right? It's the same argument for life, right? There's a point, all the way down the line, 1% chance of life starting on a planet or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it happened here, so we know it has to work sometimes.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know, though. Honestly, I'm one of those weird science nerds where, like, chemists are weird because we didn't like going to planetariums as kids, and we didn't like playing with animals. we were just straight up like, I want to be alone in a dark dungeon mixing stuff. Like that was what I always liked as a kid. When I read Harry Potter, I was like, I would love to be in potions class. That looks awesome. It sounds so great. So for me, like, I don't know, space is such an impossibly huge problem. Those questions of the Big Bang and stuff, that I love the math. I love all the high level equations that come from it and everything. And
yeah, those
discussions really fascinate me. But again,
either you just froze right now or you're taking a very long pause. I think it's a Skype thing again. So I'll probably finish that sentence for you. So then again, you just don't know. That's what I think you would have said. And I'm going to hang in there and see if he comes back. If he doesn't come back in a couple of seconds here, then I'm just going to call him back on Skype. So anyone can call in the show. That number is listed right up on YouTube channel over at KGRA Radio. I go ahead and have Evan, if you would, text that in that chat over to them in the chat room. And let's see. Oh, there you are. You're back. You didn't know.
Changing Wi-Fi networks.
You probably didn't know you were gone. And
I didn't.
I finished a sentence for you. I finished a sentence for you. So when you listen back at the recording, I hope you're happy with what I said. I finished your sentence.
I think and then at the beginning of everything there was blank. So I'm hoping you said, I don't know, cheese or something good.
Really, yeah, the moon had to come from somewhere. It's made out of cheese. So that's
definitely
it. Yeah,
cheese.
It's solved.
Straight up.
Yeah. Well, I think this is actually absolutely fascinating, really. And I'm sorry that you have your the Skype issues you've had there. But continuing on, so the different parts of your education and your thoughts and all that. I believe I heard you say on Alejandro's show that you're the type of person that doesn't really judge someone. You think people need to say their thing, but whether it's true or not, that's where. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So so first off, I think there is a caveat to that. I think so. First off, if you have had an experience with something, a ghost, a UFO, a whatever, right? I have no way of knowing whether or not what you experienced was true or not. And regardless of that, even unless you're just telling a lie, whatever you experienced really happened to you. Whether it was a mistake, you mistook something else for something, or it was genuine. Something happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so from an investigative standpoint, or from the standpoint of, say, anyone doing a good ethical investigation, I can't presuppose, I bet this one's a hoax, or this one I definitely think is, real, or whatever. That should have no play on how I take your story in and how I choose to investigate it and the ultimate conclusions that I draw. At the same time, though, I think that there is great value in once you test something, once something is proven to be something or some way, it's been proven. That's it. It's done. Stop talking about it. Because, and again, that threshold for what is proven versus unproven, that gets to be very tricky always. But still, it's the only way that studies, that investigations of any sort happen accurately and happen over time. So we can take the example of it's one of the hallmarks of pseudoscience, in my opinion, that a pseudoscientific principle it's never refuted. It's never changed with evidence. It just sticks around. And the biggest hallmark really is that not only does it stick around, it just changes forms. So when you disprove that it's something, the idea still sticks around. They just change kind of the fabric or the dressing of the idea. So a good example of that would be the idea of witchcraft back in the medieval period all the way up to, say, the Protestant Reformation, right, for example, and even to the modern day, let's say, where at the beginning of these ideas of demon lore and everything else, the idea of a witch was someone who communicated directly with a being that was as powerful as God, right? They were communing with something that it seemed to be equal to God in its power. It could break the laws of the physical reality that we live in. It seemed to be under no domain or dominion. It could just do whatever it wanted. But over time, our ideas about what a demon could be or couldn't be changed. So you had people like, say, St. Augustine coming in and saying, or St. Thomas Aquinas coming and saying, well, no, it doesn't, even philosophically or theologically, it doesn't make sense that something evil could be as good as the ultimate good or the ultimate creator or whatever. So those ideas had to be thrown away. And so those arguments stopped being made. But the ultimate idea that, let's say, for example, a witch could poison your family or make you ill or something, that was no longer because they were putting a curse on you and changing the way that you acted or whatever. It simply changed over to, well, now they're learning, the demon is bringing them special poultices and potions and things that'll poison you. And so it's just that the demon is more knowledgeable than you are. And over time, that idea kept shrinking. The role of the powers of the demon, of the witch, shrunk to such a point that the modern day viewpoint of, say, the idea of a witch as being something truly frightening is gone today. We hardly think of them as being powerful, malevolent beings.
Right.
And that's but again, those ideas have just shifted. So as opposed to, say, we think that people could be demon-human hybrids that are coming to wreak havoc on the earth, we think about alien-human hybrids, right? As opposed to thinking about, say, and you get the point I'm making, right? These ideas just stick around and don't change. If we hope to make ufology a real study, a real science, we need to be able to find new evidence, refute old ideas with that evidence, and then move forward with new ideas. Because otherwise, we're just going to be talking about the same cases forever and ever and ever. That's kind of where we've been.
So, do you think in general, the UFO community is stagnant at this point? In the stagnation, do you think some of that comes from, no big sightings happening that people are talking about, and to throw that in the whole mix, I'm sure you were paying attention when the December 16th article came out in the New York Times, excuse me, and people seem to take the topic a lot more serious.
Yeah, so I am one of those people that, I think that the study of UFOs is, if it is a science, if there's something real happening, and even if there isn't something real, if we want to treat it like a science, then we should look at other sciences that have affected large dispersed populations of people in a seemingly random manner. How did we remove the randomness from that equation? We didn't do it by looking at individual cases. We did it by looking at statistics. So I give an example I always give this example of diseases and how diseases spread through populations, right? If you wanted to find what the cause was for a new type of disease, you wouldn't be wasting your time going to every hospital ward and investigating every single individual case and hoping that that one case is the one that gives you the smoking gun that this is where this disease is coming from. You would study thousands of cases over a large population sample and see where the commonalities are. That's where I think the UFO field should move towards. It is very interesting to me that right around the time where public perception of UFOs as a topic seems to be kind of hitting the upswing, where people are starting to be more open to the idea generally, that there really has not been a very, very good case. And I wonder almost if that isn't because we're trying to be more careful this time around about what case we put out there, right? I mean, you have this very small glimmer of public support that's coming out. And, you don't want to ruin that by, shouting from the rooftops the first case that you think. But at the same time, too, I think that I do think that in some ways the field has kind of stagnated, but that's only true at these large. I think that's only true of, say, the old way of thinking about the question. I think there's a lot of young researchers and a lot of independent people writing books, doing research, investigating these things that are adding something to the equation that wasn't there before. And honestly, I mean, I have found a lot of really wonderful people who are interested in this subject and who want to talk about it and want to learn more through the medium of podcasting. And there are so many great podcasts that do this sort of topic, right? Mm-hmm. That, again, I think the public knowledge of the idea is just going to keep going up. It's going to keep rising. Whether or not that is ultimately handled the right way or not by the community is something entirely. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah. There's one thing I've brought up a number of times on the show, and that is, that when people first start if someone all of a sudden, takes it serious, that never really thought about it because of, say, the September 16th article, and they saw it in the news a number of times and all that, and then they start poking around on YouTube, they're going to come on a couple of websites, a couple of channels that are known for hoax UFOs, and, it's a dead-end street when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of, honestly, it's why I think it's so important that one of the first things that we should do as a group, as a community, is get rid of, you got to prune away the dead branches, right? Those dead ends. I mean, off the top of, if we had another 2 hours, we could probably talk nonstop, just listing names of cases and YouTube channels and, books and whatever that have been disproven to the point of just ridiculousness, right? I mean, how many books have to come out that disprove the same thing before we get the picture?
Yeah.
And so it is a big problem, I think, and because we haven't done our own housekeeping, I guess, it is that way, that the first thing people are going to find when they I always give this example because I think it's a big issue. One of the first things that comes up if you look for UFOs on Facebook are these groups of people who think they're starseeds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never done that experiment, so.
Oh, wow. My goodness. It's interesting, right? Or if you search for, aliens or grays or anything else, right? Stuff that kind of buzzwords that the public will know about. One of the first things you get are these groups of people who are, oh, my aura today is really dark. I'm really feeling it today. I wish I was back home on, wherever, right? That's not a great look. It's just, it's not, it's going to be a challenge, I think. So yeah, I just did the experiment myself again here. Alien UFO sightings, reptilians, UFOs, and conspiracies. That's
kind of taken over by the fringe of it, really.
It definitely has been, and that's unfortunate because again, there are. I mean, my first big event that I went to with this kind of stuff, I met scientists who worked on nuclear power. I talked to bank executives and economists and psychologists and professors and all these wonderful people with all these great backgrounds and all this vast knowledge, so much more knowledge than I one person by themselves can contain. But because there's kind of a loud, I guess, minority opinion, shouting, we're aliens. That's what people are going to see. So I really do think it's important that we try to both get ahead of that message so that when the public perception does shift, we don't, again, kind of throw it out the window. But at the same time, we do have to, as a community, find a better way of engaging groups like that, I think.
Yeah.
Because, again, that ultimate question of, well, if they don't really think this, is it just role play? Do people really believe this? Is there something to this? Like, all those ideas at this point are all equally valid, although some are more likely than others, let's say, because we haven't looked at it at all. And so I think it's important that we, again, you can't silence opinions, but once you have found a conclusion, you should probably put it out there for other people to try to tear down, and then see what happens. It's the way that science, the way that progress like that happens.
Right. Yeah. There's really nothing we can do about, the way out there and the hoaxes and all that. The only thing we can do is keep our side of the street clean. And if someone approaches us that wants to talk, I do get a lot of email from people and try to talk to them logically. So up on the chat room, there was a question, and anyone feel free to call in. The number's up on the screen. Michael wanted to know, do you believe in cold fusion and free energy, and that aliens have already figured that out? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think that so okay, there's a couple of things there. It's like three separate questions pulled into one.
Yep.
I believe in theory that cold fusion could happen. It hasn't yet, as far as I can tell. But I do think, though, that it's one of those interesting thought experiments where if you look at the question from a scientific perspective, it appears that, okay, well, we don't have it. Why would we ever hide it if we had it, et cetera, whatever. But from the philosophical standpoint, in my mind, you can see good reasons why if we did have it, we might hide it. Right? The economy runs on energy.
That's
right. The basis of the economy. So potentially it is a very good I don't know. Anyways, but I think that there's a lot of things there to unpack and think about and talk about. Potentially, if you are even coming at it academically from a non-scientific point of view, it's an important question, I think, of if we did have that access, what would we do? What is a society that has access to that kind of energy source like, or what might it be like? I would argue that if there is a civilization that can travel here, they must have some access to an extreme source of efficient energy. What that energy source is, we don't know. But I would say, though, that just from thermodynamics, no energy is free. Right? There's 0 point energy potentially. But even that then has to be coming from someplace. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It has to transport somehow. So I suspect that if they do have the ability to travel here, they have access to some either extraordinarily energy dense type of way of holding energy, or they are very adept at generating or harvesting energy from sources that we don't know of currently on Earth.
Yeah. I've thought of stuff like that, and one of the things I've said, maybe they just figured something out in physics that we could never even think of yet, or may never. Let's see. This is this is going back to the Big Bang. Someone just asked over at the KGRA radio chat. Ronald, did the Big Bang occur with a single bang? That's another softball.
I like to think it was a drum solo. I don't even know.
Yeah. And there are theories that it's happened, like the universe has shrunken down to this tiny little mass and, blown up, and has done this repeatedly, throughout time, whatever, time is. So, yeah, all philosophical questions, really. Someone was asking, I know we talked about MUFON and Gone, but they said, did you ever feel like MUFON was like almost like government controlled in any type of way? Did you ever have any of those thoughts? I don't know exactly what the question was.
Only in that MUFON, only a government could be as inefficient. No, so I never found any evidence or saw any evidence or felt at all that MUFON was being, when this question gets asked, you get asked it in 3 different ways, right? The first question is, was MUFON being run well by humans, by people, right? Just everyday people that are interested.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, that's one question. The next one is MUFON being controlled by the government or New World Order or whatever? That's a different type of question.
The deep state, yeah.
Right. And then the third one is MUFON being controlled by Robert Bigelow? That's the third. Those are the
well,
three
I understand
questions.
that. I understand the Bigelow one because
that one, and that definitely in order of. Well, no, I guess not in order of likelihood, but yeah, no, I completely understand the Bigelow one as well. Right. I never felt any evidence that it was being. So to answer your question seriously, I never felt any evidence that there was government control or anything like that. Any specific method of disinformation or anything. Frankly, I think that we have done such a good job ourselves of chasing our own tail that
we make our own disinformation.
The government hasn't. The government. That's the beauty of Facebook, right? And these other things. The government is like, well, all we had to do was ask them to do this, and they, or give them the ability. They do it themselves. This is great. So, no, I never had any evidence of things like that. I will say that your experience with MUFON, though, will change drastically from chapter to chapter, is what I found and experienced. Where there are some chapters where it is run like an investigative force, right? And then there are some chapters where it's, you're hanging out on the weekends and drinking coffee and watching weird documentaries. So it is definitely varied. But yeah, again, personally, I found no evidence of anything like that, any government interference or anything.
Well, I was trying to look while you were talking, and Ray Stanford has been on the show. Not sure if you're familiar with who he is. He's a longtime researcher. He often listens to the show, and he was basically the first researcher outside of Project Blue Book that showed up at the Socorro incident and wrote a book, a very good book actually, about the Socorro incident. And Ray has a story about being at a spectacular MUFON event back in I think he said it was the 1980s, and there was a company that he said he was part of it. He was part of the setup, and he said, "How can MUFON afford this?" It was like it was a 6-figure event, and so. Oh, we have a sponsor, and it's this company. And Ray did research and found out that it was a shell company for actually that had something to do with the government. So there was suspicion from him, and he actually, when I had Jen Harzan on the show a year and a half or 2 years ago or whatever, Ray actually called in and confronted him, and he didn't really have, he had no idea. And of course, it wouldn't be something that would be passed down through MUFON, if that something like that did happen. I thought it was interesting anyway.
Yeah, I'll say this: if MUFON is a charitable organization in the United States, right? Which means that in theory, although that actually might be changing soon with certain law changes or whatever. But whatever, for the time being, at least, that means that you can look up their financial records for free online, like any other charity. And so if you're really interested, you can do that. And, again, at the time that besides my lanyard, I bought everything myself. Right? So if there was government funding going on, I have some expense reports to fill out, I think. No, but seriously, though, I do think that...
Actually, I just want to stop you there just to clarify that this was only for this specific event, and it was. I remember Ray was telling me. I think Uri Geller was there, and there was a couple of things that were kind of different, and so it was only for the event that he knew about. I don't think it was any mention of any other thing to do with MUFON other than that.
I was going to say, I mean, I do think that there are some. I'm going to say, as hopeful as I am about, say, To the Stars Academy, I think that, again, that is going to become an area rife for conspiracy theory online and these ideas and everything else, right? It already is, really.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of email from different people about that, yes.
Sure. And so I do think that it's, although I hope that they do well, and I, frankly, I mean, if I got a phone call tomorrow, like, come on board, I'd be like, yes, I'm going, but if, again, that's why it's so important to have multiple groups doing this, not have one centralized group. It's why it's so important to have healthy peer review and competition in any kind of study field, because if not, it becomes very easy for one group, even if, say, it's not government money, it could be a single person, it could be a certain group of people, it could be a book publisher decides to help fund half of group A's expenses, and all of a sudden they're hawking all their books all the time, right? Like, all of that goes away if you have a robust, healthy community that is engaged in peer review and critique. So it's part of why I think, although it's great that To the Stars is going on and everything, we can't put all our eggs in that basket, because it's not going to take a lot for what they're doing to be called into question. And what if they find nothing, right? And then that was supposed to be the thing that proved UFOs were real, right? To the whole public too. So it's I don't think it's a great position to put our field in, frankly.
Okay, so we have another question from Silly Humans in the chat room, and I agree with him. His name. So the question is, what about the idea that UFO physics tech is being suppressed because it would make a frighteningly instantaneous weapon delivery system? There's been, I know, Stan Friedman has talked about that, like if it's, what if we had it and they didn't, type of thing.
Yeah. Let's put it this way: if there either has been or if there will be something like that happening on Earth, where an alien civilization comes down, and whatever country they pick, that country becomes the center of the world. They show up in Belarus. Well, looks like we're learning Belarusian. That's it. I mean, the advance in technology, in my opinion, would be same kind of idea. It would be so vast that it would just upend things completely. Now, in terms of these more metaphysical questions of, say, it's being suppressed because humans can't handle it, or we'll all kill each other or whatever, look what we're doing with Facebook. If there was ever evidence that we weren't ready for a technology, it is Facebook.
Yeah, it's been showing that lately, hasn't it? Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. At least when people were using clubs, only one person could whack me over the head at a time. It's amazing the damage you can do with words, despite preschool. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think it would be, what a terrible what a terrible thing it would be if we found out in 50 years that all of this geopolitical anxiety was all just a farce, right? That actually we've had this technology for so long. And again, from a pragmatic point of view, you know, I don't know if it necessarily it changes the way that we investigate, if it changes the way that we live our lives, anything else like that. So I think it's interesting, but I don't know necessarily if it's a useful avenue of research, I guess. At least it's useful, but it's useful in the same sense as, say, metaphysics in philosophy is useful. It's interesting. It teaches you things. It does teach you about yourself and potentially helps you answer other questions. But you're never going to be, no one has ever made any money off of metaphysics. I think it's the same kind of thing here, where I'm not sure that kind of question or that kind of discussion is going to bring us any closer to answers on the UFO question.
Yeah, I got that. So I was just looking for another question up here. I saw one earlier, but so what do you think is the future of the group you're involved in? We talked about it earlier again. Alejandro's it's a board right now at this point, isn't it?
Yep.
And so can you talk a little bit about that and the goals of that organization?
So right now we're a relatively loosely organized group of about 40 researchers who are scientifically minded and kind of faced towards very serious investigations and discussions of the UFO phenomena. Mm-hmm. And so right now, really, I think where the group hopes to be is finding more kind of central members to do these kinds of work, these kind of investigations and things. And but right now, I think it's all very in flux, But mm-hmm. I would suggest if you're interested, if you are a scientifically minded or just a serious investigator with a lot of just a serious person who's interested in getting involved and learning about this stuff, shoot the group an email. It's the SCU. Shoot me an email, whatever. I'll put you in contact. Shoot Alejandro an email. Because I do think it's important that we, again, build a robust community doing this kind of stuff.
Okay, so SCU.
Yes.
And it's called the Coalition of
Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy.
Coalition of so anyone can find that website. I'm just going to announce it real quickly. It's explorescu.org. So you can go there and check it out online. Well, that's interesting. I'm glad that's happening. Can anyone actually contact someone there and talk about cases, or what is something they may have some, extra evidence on, or something like that? Or
currently it is again pretty. Currently, what the group hopes to do is kind of have these independent researchers write white papers, write research papers.
I got it.
That go out to the public.
I got it.
So, in terms of actually investigating cases, that's still something that I think is up in the air.
Yeah.
Right, because that adds a layer.
Yes.
Of complexity.
Absolutely.
So
it's kind of a standalone sort of situation.
More almost more of a think tank, I would say. Yeah.
Wow. And white papers. Are there actually published papers out there now? Or is that just a goal?
There are a couple of papers that were published by members, by affiliates, for sure. I don't think they're available on the website just yet. And I don't think anything has been officially published yet by the SCU. But there are things that people are working on and writing. I had an article that came out on kind of the philosophical viewpoint of UFO investigations that I think we should take. So there is stuff coming along in the pipeline. And again, if people want to get involved, I can't speak for the whole SCU, but if people want to get involved in some of the work that we're trying to do, some of the white papers we're trying to write, again, shoot me an email, chrisfcogswell@gmail.com.
All right, so I'm going to throw you another softball here. If you had to give your best guess as a philosopher, what do you think people are seeing? If they're seeing, I'm saying, what do you think people are seeing their unexplainable ones in the sightings?
Yeah. So, yeah, very easy question. Oh my goodness. So again, just to put it in context, I definitely believe that 99%, if not more, of the cases that come out every year are probably misidentifications or whatever, tricks of the mind or what have you. That small percentage that's real, honestly, I can't say. I don't think there's enough evidence either way. I think that whatever it is clearly intelligent. I think whatever it is clearly capable of playing, I don't know if games is the right word, but certainly of playing on the emotions of humans, making them frightened, making them question their own kind of sanity or viewpoint. And I believe that there is certainly some kind of, regardless of the commonalities, or not the commonalities, regardless of the differences between the cases that have occurred over time, there do seem to be commonalities. So all I can say for certain is that I think there is a hard kernel of reality in there somewhere. What it is, though, I think would be, it's the same thing as what's before the Big Bang, right? It could be anything. The only thing I can, maybe I'll make this like, as opposed to Descartes' demon, I can call this Cogswell's alien or something. The only thing I can be certain of is that I'm not the one abducting people in a spaceship. That's,
Are you sure?
I'm like, again, almost 100% sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but that's what is so fascinating is who knows?
Yeah, it is. That's what kind of keeps me going. I find it really fascinating. So why don't you go ahead and give out your information? I just heard you say your email address. How about your website for your podcast?
Yeah, so the website is themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @madscientistpod. And if you search the Mad Scientist Podcast in all of your iTunes aggregates, SoundCloud, Spotify, all of them, we will show up. Our logo is the one with the jack-o'-lantern, so it's easy to find. This week, this past month, we have been covering a UFO case from Claremont, New Hampshire. That's kind of fallen into the dustbin of history because this investigator kind of changed from a very serious investigator in his early life into a very metaphysical kind of investigator later on. So it's fascinating, though, and it has a lot of personal connections to my own story because the farm where a lot of the sightings in Claremont took place is a farm that's now owned by my fiance's grandma.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh,
so
I wish I had more time to talk about that because that's not too far away from where I am right now. Chris, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You were a great guest. I really, really enjoyed you a lot.
Oh, no problem. Thanks so much for having me anytime.
All right. You take care.
Cool. Bye.
All right, everyone. So that's it for the show. Thanks so much for listening and hanging in with us. And we are going to be back next week. We're going to be on location in Exeter, New Hampshire at Mac Maloney. With him, we're going to be doing a simulcast, three-way simulcast show at a radio station next week. For those people on YouTube, you can actually see that. We're going to be filming there at the same time. Should be a lot of fun. So that's next Tuesday. All right. I want to thank everyone that helped out with the show. Our Alejandro Rojas, of course, and our guest, Chris Cogswell. I also want to thank Evan for working in the background, and Bill over at KGRA Radio. And that's it, everyone. We'll see you next week, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
Clear. Great show, gentlemen.